Hello, 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 hello. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to check out this episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. I wanted to have a conversation tonight because someone, actually, Auntie Anita sent me a video about who I put in the thumbnail, Psych Hacks, Orion Terban. We're going to discuss one of his videos, and that's talking about the male loneliness epidemic, or if there is one. And we're going to look at that and we're going to dissect whether that's going on or not. So, as usual, please make sure that you say hello so that I can acknowledge you. And hello to you, Yoli. Thank you so much for becoming a faithful listener there. I really, really appreciate it. So I'm not going to belabor their time tonight because I tend to do this and it takes we're on for hour and a half, 2 hours. Not that that's an issue as long as we have something good to say, but I wanted to kind of jump into it here because I wanted to go over Orion's um, video, which I have not watched. So I'm anxiously looking forward to it. So to hello to all of you who are joining and going to join and all that. So we're going to talk about male loneliness and what that means. And just off the top, well, I did kind of do some of this off the top of my head, but I also did a little bit of research, digging around, Googling and things along those lines. And trying to figure out, is there a male loneliness epidemic? What's going on with this? What should we be doing about it? In particular, and for Black men. Now, I want to put this in quotation marks. This is something that we as Black men have been dealing with for a long time, and then that's joblessness, not so much loneliness, but just joblessness and the frustrations that have gone along with joblessness and what that looks like. And now that it's hitting the more dominant society, this seems to be an issue with them. And this is not. I didn't bring up the research. I could have done it, but this is not the first time in human history, or the United States history, or Western history. We'll go with that. United States history, that there's been talk about what to do with men. It happened after the Civil War. It happened after the Spanish American War. What do we do with men? Right, men are becoming soft, and all this different type of stuff. You guys can go back and that and look into that. I didn't think about it now. I didn't think about it before, but I could have pulled up some of that research. It's actually fascinating to read because they're saying the same things then that they were saying now. All men are lost. They don't have any purpose. Now that the wars are over, they're coming back. A lot of them, what do they call it, shell shock or whatever their terminology was. Then they come back with all these mental problems from war, from the casualties, and are seeing their brothers and sisters dying alongside them and all that, brothers dying alongside of them, and so they start to isolate and feel lonely, and the economy's changing and this, that, and the other. So it's always been an issue. So we're going to get into that in just a second. Let me say hello to a couple more people who have joined in. That's Darlene Eaton. Hello to you. Hello to A Good, and hello to Rhonda. Okay. So first thing is we're going to get into Dr. Orion Terban's video in a few minutes here. That's going to be the main crux of what I want to talk about today. But the first thing that I want to bring up is, right, we're talking about male loneliness, right? So this is, we're going to get a broad range of all this type of stuff. And let me just also say from the beginning here that, I don't care what type of man you are. I am pushing for masculine presence and all that. But I don't have a problem with people who want to live alternative lifestyles. I don't have people who are more artsy. In fact, I think that we need a lot of artsy people, right? Those become the best actors and all this kind of stuff, right? Those people are super hyper masculine and all that. So I've said that before. I'll put that out there again. But just be the best version of yourself. All right. So we're gonna go with this here. This is a male loneliness epidemic and how it affects fathers. Okay. So again, I don't have a problem with people talking about this kind of stuff, but this is a guy who was an author and a stay-at-home dad, Shannon Carpenter. This is from CNN. I mean, really? Really? He's a good dad. Seems to be a good dad. He's been a dad. He was a stay-at-home dad 15 years ago. I mean, what are we talking about here, right? So, and he talks about a book that I've read, Boys and Men by Richard Reeves, friendship deficiency and all this kind of stuff, right? Goes over some numbers. 48% men feel satisfied, surveys and all this type of stuff. And here's his story, right? When I was a new stay-at-home dad, I took my children to the mall to the mall playground one day, sat on the floor with my newborn while the toddler played on the German fested equipment. I had my arm draped over the end of the bench while I read a book. Okay, this is he's at the playground reading a book with his children. Soon a mom's group came to the bench, put down their bags and parked their strollers. Then one mom sat on my arm and didn't even notice. How does a woman sit on your arm and not notice that she's on you? I don't really understand that. Eventually, I politely said excuse me to her and she looked at me shocked and didn't offer an apology. Apparently, I was invisible. Probably, probably, and we're going to get into this a little bit more because you were invisible to them because you weren't presenting masculine qualities. You're at the park with us as we're pushing strollers. Our husbands, presumably, this is what I'm doing a thought experiment here. Presumably, the women's husbands were at work and you're here with us watching the kids and reading a book. That does not present as super uber masculine traits and qualities that people want to see or that women want to see. So she more than likely, if gauging that this story was true, didn't recognize your presence and didn't recognize your masculinity and your command presence and all the other things I talk about on this channel. And so she just sits in your arm, and then when she offends you somehow, she doesn't even acknowledge you, doesn't offer an apology, and you're invisible to her. That's my thoughts about it. So then he goes on to talk about these different types of things. You guys can read this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, reading all this, but this is on CNN. You can go over to it. And again, the article is called "The Male Loneliness Epidemic and How It Affects Fathers." And again, this is guys a stay-at-home fathers, right? So he's talking about how he doesn't feel as if he has anyone he can confide in, right? Anyone he can talk to. I would suggest that given our state of being, that he's dealing with a different type of command presence, a different type of presence. That's what I'm dealing. That's what I'm assuming he's dealing with, right? He is not. Um, he is not the typical role model that I think that a lot of women are going after, and that'll become apparent in a little bit, right? Okay, so that's that guy. Here's another article: Why most men don't have enough close friends. She doesn't really explain why, but she tries. Why is it so hard for men to make close friends? We'll read a little bit of this. When Cilio first began conducting research on male friendships in 1995, many participants assumed the survey was about alternative lifestyles. I don't know if I can say that without getting demonetized. He said, such stereotypes that male bonding would be or become sexual in nature are inaccurate, but revealed some of what may be holding some men back from deep friendships, he added. So because because we don't associate in a certain type of way, I hope you guys can all see this, and let me make it a little bit larger here. Because we don't all associate the same type of way, there's some type of homosexuality going on to it, right? Or we're knuckle dragging troglodytes. Assumptions nearly 30 years later might be different, but social pressures remain that make it difficult for men to express vulnerability and intimacy needed for close friendships. Cilio said, I don't know what these people are talking about, but I think a lot of times they're looking for men to behave like women, and this is going to become apparent in a little bit because we don't express ourselves in the same way. But I don't have a problem with men having a core group, 2 3 guys that they could go crack open a beer with, go fishing with, and then tell them about their relationship woes and problems, how they got laid off or how they're still dealing with an addiction or whatever. I think that's important. I definitely think that's important to be able to to be able to talk like that. But because we're not doing it the same way, I just can't get along. I just can't get down with that. We are all born with two sides of ourselves. The hard line is the stoic and independent, and the soft one that is vulnerable and independent, said Way, author of Deep Secrets, Boy Friendships in the Connection Crisis. I've not read the book. I don't know what he's going to say, but this soft tone of vulnerable and interdependent. I mean, there's something to be said about that in conjunction with how men have been traditionally raised to be stoic, strong, to get out there, get it out the mud, make things happen, conquer the world, fight lions, tigers, bears, fight wars, etc. Right? There's something that has to be said about that. The hard line has been characterized as masculine and inherently preferable, and the soft side has been feminine and lesser than, Way said. That's important, not because men say so. And I'm going to prove this in a second here. Case study. Not because men say so. This is important not because men say so, but because women are saying so as well. The women are saying so. Boys receive messages that growing up and manning up, meaning shedding the soft side, a mindset that neuroscience, social science, and developmental psychology all shows harmful to them. It's not harmful in the way that they say. I don't know if I have this. I have the study here somewhere. I might have closed it out. It is harmful. I'm not going to say it's not harmful, but it's not harmful as you're going to grow up and become some guy who gets into bar fights everywhere you go. It's harmful because you don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. It's harmful because you don't form the connections with family and friends, or you have problems at work. That's the way that in which it's harmful. We gender relationships as feminine, Chu said. If that's a feminine thing, it becomes weakness or a liability. Men need if men admit to needing friendships. I think that we should have some friendships. Characterizing the gender of these experiences has a clear impact, Celio said. Men who were more emotionally restricted, focused on power, and who scored high in surveys measuring homophobia are less likely to have intimate and close friendships, he said. Something needs to be done about that. I don't have any issues with that. And the drive to toughen up and never showing the vulnerability that restricts men from friendships can lead to loneliness, violence, and anger. I don't know if I agree with that. And I've read some literature about that, academic literature about that. I don't know if I agree with all that. All right. Okay. So next article here is just talking about the state of American friendships, change, challenges, and loss. Findings from the May 2021 American Perspective Survey. Personal pandemic challenges. A lot of this loneliness that we're talking about is still holdovers from the pandemic, even 5 years later, or at least when they looked at this. A lot of people, fell off the wagon or fell off their, friendships and things along those lines. Why do Americans really rely on personal support? All this kind of stuff. So I'm just giving these articles for things that you all can go back and read and all that for at another time. So I gave you 2 CNN articles. Here's another one: The Male Loneliness Epidemic from Western Oregon University. Very, very short read here. Just talks about the numbers and what's going on. It doesn't try to offer any type of solutions. And people are struggling to come up with these solutions, right? Here's another one from a Medium blog, Medium newsletter. Doesn't say who authored it. Short read here: Untangling the Male Loneliness Epidemic. And let's see. A 2021 survey revealed that men have, on average, 50% fewer close friendships than women. And the number of close friendships has plummeted over the last 20 years. Scott Galloway, we're going to talk about him in a little bit, podcast host, marketing professor, and masculinity pundit, okay, writes on Medium about his crisis of underemployment and under-socialization. Remember, one of the first things I said is that this is not the first time in history that they're talking about this male masculinity crisis. After wars, particularly Spanish-American War, when the soldiers came home, they want to know what they're going to do with these men, right? So underemployment is an issue. Again, the dominant society or the dominant culture is now dealing with an unemployment issue, particularly in construction and more masculine type of jobs. It's becoming an issue, right? Under socialization, young men are facing under socialization. I would also attribute that to video games, online presence where you don't have to go outside. Slightly more than women, 57 to 54%. Those aren't huge disparities. When they talk about these numbers, it's not a huge number. Slightly more than women, 57 to 54%. Under the age of 24 live with their parents. That's a lot to do with the economy. Men under 30 are more likely to be single. Again, because of the economy, they can't find a job. Women don't find them as viable mates. Maybe because women are dating above their age bracket, age and financial status. A third of men haven't had sex in the last year. Gallery has promoted this stat, but in truth, everyone is having less sex than they did a decade ago. Men, women, old, young, everyone, right? At the same time, research is pretty clear that we're all lonely lonelier today than we were a decade ago. A Gallup survey last year discovered that men and women are equally lonely. Elaine Graham, associate professor of social sciences at Northwestern University, analyzed nine longitudinal studies of loneliness and found that women self-report being lonely more than men. This is a problem that's going on between men and women. Right. To me, this conversation around the so-called male loneliness epidemic, this is whoever authored this, I guess Harris Sokol, and somebody highlighted this. The conversation about male loneliness epidemic conflates multiple things: self-reported loneliness, a subjective experience equally felt across genders. We just looked at that. Singledom, everybody, a lot more people are single, not getting married, which is not the same thing as being lonely. And celibacy, not the same thing. So you guys can read that over. Just something else to read. Do we become more lonely with age? This is one of the longitudinal studies that the previous article, a blog talked about. And the answer is yes. As we get older, friends die. We fall out of friends, all this kind of stuff, and we just kind of stick to being lonely as we get older. But they're also noticing the trend in younger people as well. Again, it's the pandemic. It's working from home, things along those lines. The epidemic of male loneliness. This is from Substack. Melinda Winter Moyer. So she's talking about it. Not really anything earth shattering here. Today, I'm going to zero in on specific issues of boys and friendships because what my son has voiced to me, in fact, widespread phenomenon, and has a tragic implications. In the nonprofit organization Equal Mundo's 2023 State of American Men survey, 2/3 of age men 18 to 23 said that they felt that no one really knows me. Again, I would blame a lot of this on video games, not going outside, just a changing environment, lack of jobs where you can meet people, things along those lines, right? The gig economy, if everybody's driving Uber, you really don't get a good chance to meet people. All right, so here's an opinion piece. I'll get to your comments. I'm going to get to the main thing in a second here. This is an opinion piece from the Washington Post. I can't read the full article. Number one, because it take too long. And number two, because it's behind a paywall. I actually pay for the Washington Post, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But there are something that's important here. So this lady, Christine Emba, I'm actually going to reach out to her, see if she'll come on the podcast, have a discussion about this. Men are lost. Here's a map out of the wilderness. A year later, she wrote this article. I'm sorry, 1 month later, right? Because this article was written July 10th, 2023. She wrote this one August 14th, 2023. How should men be? Who's an ideal man? Our male readers have thoughts. That's gonna be important here. Okay, so this is her article again. I'm not gonna read the whole thing because it is behind a paywall, but I want to highlight a certain portion here. I am gonna read this. What the heck? Okay, here it is. So we'll start right here. I think she's talking to Richard Reeves here. The thing is, I get it. I understand the reluctance to spend time worrying about men, and I say that someone who loves them as friends, romantic partners and members of my family. Justifiably progressives want to preserve the majority of gains made for women over the past several decades, gains that are still fragile. Here's what she's saying, and she's interviewing someone. You guys can, if you have the Washington Post, you can go read it. She's saying that women have made certain strides, and because they made those strides, men somehow along the way have felt lost. Men were traditionally protectors and providers. They don't feel the need to protect and provide anymore, right? Women, they're bossing up. So where is the man's place at? This is what is being talked about right here. It's easy to mistake attention as zero sum, to fear that putting effort toward helping men might mean we won't have space for women anymore. So people don't want to focus on men what's going on with their college attendance, what's going on with, in particular, black boys in schools, suspension rates, all this different type of stuff. They don't want to focus on that because it's like, what about the girls? What about the women? In this article, I don't know if I'm going to read it right now, but in this article, she talks about that when President Obama started My Brother's Keeper, that 1,000 women signed a petition saying, "What about the girls?" There's something inherent about never wanting to focus on men, and that's an issue. That's an issue. There's something appealing too about the idea of gender neutrality, or at least rejecting gender essentialism as a social ethos. In other words, just because you're a man doesn't mean you have to be masculine, or just because you're feminine doesn't mean you have to. Excuse me, just because you're a woman or female doesn't mean you have to be um, uh, adhere to certain gender norms about what a woman should be and how they should act. After all, attaching specific traits to men would redound to women too. If we say real men are strong, does that mean women must be weak? If men are leaders, are women destined to follow? These are questions that people are still wrestling with. And again, this leadership discussion is something that's had in my own field, which is leadership, right? So my anybody who doesn't know, my degree, my dissertation was about leadership, or is in leadership. What are the credentials? What are the credentials of leadership? How do leadership act? How do leaders act? What does strong leadership look like? What does weak leadership look like? What does ineffective leadership look like? That's all different types of stuff that I looked at. How do we look at it from a psychological, sociological, and a political spectrum about how leaders act, function, how to get things done, how do we measure success, and a lot of that has to do with their command presence and their presence. Most men who are tall are assumed to be leaders, even though they might not have the innate qualifications such as intelligence, emotional intelligence, and other factors. People are more apt to select them as leaders, right? You take the president of the United States, generally, it's always been men, right? But they're generally taller than, the average, what, 5'9", 5'10" American male. They're generally taller than that, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", right? So this is all different types of things that we look for in leadership, right? And are women destined to follow? I'm convinced that men are in crisis, and I strongly suspect that ending it will require a positive vision of what masculinity entails that is particular, that is neither neutral nor interchangeable with femininity. This is a word salad. Right? He wants to fix the boy crisis, but we don't know what to do about women. That was the first thing she said. Right? We don't want to give up the gains that women have made over these years. That was the first, well, not the first thing they said, but what I'm highlighting here. They addressed that. How do you fix men? And I'm not pretending to have the answer. I'm not pretending to have the answer. I'm saying that we got, in order to fix men, you got to take a look at what's happened to them. You got to take a look at that, right? And their place in society. There's a reason a lot of writing on this crisis of masculinity ends at the diagnosis stage. The reason it ends at the diagnosis stage is because people don't want to prescribe any type of solution to the problem. They don't want to propose the solution. Take Richard Reeves' book of Boys and Men, a book that I read. Omnipresent in the discourse since its 2022 release, the Brookings Institution scholar has offered potential solutions, r- potential solutions. Even the author of this, who is a woman, said this is nonsense. And, you're not offering any solutions. The woman who wrote this is saying that. Redshirting boys by delaying kindergarten 1 year, and he does say that in the book, because boys mature slower, then we ought to make sure that they are go to school a little bit later. Creating scholarships for HEAL with its health, education, administration, and literacy jobs. So you want to send boys to school so they can enter the health field, the education field. We talked about teachers before in a previous episode. Administration, right? How to run instead of being out there, being the lumberjack. You wanted the boys to sit down inside the office and administer the lumberjack. This is what he's saying, or the factory. You name the place. Literacy. I don't know what he means by that. You want to become more English professor. I don't have a problem with anybody who wants to do this type of work, but a lot of boys don't want to do that, and you got to figure out what to do with those boys who don't want to do those types of things, right? Shooting him up with Ritalin is not going to help, right? But even he acknowledges that he felt pressure to shy away from some of the harder questions his subject matter raises. Even Richard Reeves, who wrote this book, who's pioneering all this different type of stuff, and he started his own subset of the institution, the Brookings Institution. You don't want to talk about that. You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to talk about the hard issues. And that's that a lot of men have been pushed out of the academy. They feel lost. They've been pushed out of these different facets of life, particularly American life, and they feel lost and they're angry about it. They don't have prospects for jobs. They don't have prospects for buying a home. They don't, and therefore, because they don't have prospects for jobs, education, or homes, or when they do go to school and try to get education, it's overly feminized. And there's articles written about that, academic articles about the feminization of colleges and universities. Rees told me that in his writing that he tried to stay descriptive, only going as far as to saying that some differences between sexes that need to be taken into account to create the most viable solutions. More word salad. He frames the biological differences between the sexes not as binary, but as overlapping distributions of traits, aggressions, risk appetite, sex drive, with clusters of one sex or another at the extremes. Still just diagnosing the problem. But when it came to writing any kind of description about how men should be, the self-proposed expert faltered. That's a question I basically dodged in the book. He didn't want to talk about that because candidly, it comes out of my comfort zone. It's more personal. It's harder for me to empirically justify. There are no charts I can brandish. After all, he said he's a think tank guy, a wonk. He's a think tank guy, a wonk. All right. So this then goes down a little bit, a new script for men. So she's going to try to have a conversation. She's going to have it with a guy whose name is Scott Galloway. Scott Galloway. Scott Galloway agrees. On his podcast and his newsletter, the author, entrepreneur, and professor of New York University Stern Business School has made a specialty of talking about the crisis of unattached, rudderless young men and helping them aspire to be more. On a Zoom call with me from his home in London, Professor G, he teaches at NYU and he lives in London, as he's known on his eponymous, jeez, I should have read this before, show, reclined, biceps bulging from his fitted shirt as he clasped his hand behind his shaven head, periodically unfolded them. I mean, there are certain attributes around masculinity that we should embrace. Men think about sex more than women, use that as a motivation to be successful and to meet women. This is an important statement here. Men think about sex more than women, use that as a motivation to be successful and meet women. The reason that men would rather sit home watching their funny movies is because they don't feel that as if they can compete in the dating market, because women have leveled up, so they have to be able to have a certain amount of money in order to exceed what the women are making. And if you don't feel as if you can meet their demands, then you're going to feel like it's not worth the challenge. Why should I go outside and I can't meet the challenges? Men are more impulsive. Men will run out into a field and get shot up to think that they're saving their buddies. He was careful to point out that he doesn't believe that women wouldn't do as much, but that the distributions are different. Where I think this conversation has come off the right tracks is where being a man is essentially trying to ignore all masculinity and act more like a woman. This is Scott Galloway, professor at NYU, saying this. Where I think this conversation has come off the tracks is where being a man is essentially trying to ignore all masculinity and act more like women. Remember, the first thing that I sent up here was about the guy who in my estimation was deemed to be kind of a beta, sitting at the park, not not at work, and a woman sits on his arm, treats him as invisible. Let me close some of these here. Try to slow. I think my internet is getting slowed down a little bit. All right, and even some women who say that they don't want to have sex with those guys, and they believe they're right, and they think it's a good narrative, but they don't want to partner with them. Here's what they're saying. This paragraph is saying, trying to get men to act more like women, open up, be vulnerable, talk like this, do this. Why can't you be more sensitive? Why can't you do this? Right, right. And then they say, even some women say that. Even some women say that, and they don't want to have sex with those guys. They don't want to have sex with those guys. I, a heterosexual woman, cringed in recognition. She agreed with that statement. She don't want to have sex with those guys either. The woman who wrote this, she won't have sex with those guys either. So we're trying to do all this type of stuff. So men, talking about men being lost, trying to figure out the way and trying to, what's going on with this, what's going on with that. This is what we're dealing with here, right? This is what we're dealing with. Let me close some of these here. So she wrote this, how men should be. Our male readers have some thoughts. You guys can go read that. Here's another article. The data are clear. The boys are not all right, from February 2022. This is written by a guy, Andrew Yang. Oh, this is by Andrew Yang, the guy who ran for president of the United States before, right? So he wrote this as well, right? So then APA, the American Psychological Association, they issued their first ever guidance practice for practice with men and boys. So how should psychologists, therapists talk to boys? This is such a problem that to carve this out and say, okay, we got to do something because these men are struggling in a certain type of way. So we got to figure this out. So here is the guidance. APA guidelines, American Psychological Association guidelines for psychological practice with boys and men. This was published in 2018, recognizing an issue here. And there's some definitions I want to show you because I think that they're important. First one is, you can read this whole thing over, but general role strain is a psychological situation in which gender role demands have negative consequences on the individuals and others. In other words, if you're trying to fulfill a role and you can't live up to it, then you're going to go through some psychological traumas and problems and mental health issues and things along those lines. So think about all the black men all throughout American history who were kept out of schools, kept out of jobs, looked over, weren't allowed to be the patriarchs that we are talking about. If you watch the episode with Dr. Diane Stewart, denied all this type of stuff. This is what we're dealing with. General role strain. If you believe all this stuff, I'm not saying it's 100% accurate, but boys and men experience gender role strain when they deviate from the volatile or violate gender role norms such as masculinity, try to meet or fail to meet norms of masculinity, experience discrepancies, things along those lines, right? Then there's a masculine ideology. Masculine ideology, and then there's gender role conflict, right? Guys who are in a role but feel as if they should be somewhere else, right? Privilege, gender sensitive, all these different types of terms that a lot of people don't take seriously. All right. And I think that's all the presentation I want to do. Oh yeah, this is 1,000 Women of Color. Want to keep included in my brother's keeper. Crazy. All right. So all right, we'll remove that. Give me a second here. Let me try to fix my internet here. Hold on. All right, I do apologize if it was lagging at all. Let me read through your comments and we'll get to the main. main subject for tonight. I'm deputizing for moderators this evening. Hit the like, guys, and show your appreciation. I appreciate that, Yoli. Rhonda's here. Hello, Sassy Richards. Excuse me, Sassy Red Cutie. I appreciate you helping out there. Good evening to you, Deborah Hutchinson. Mr. Stu, good evening. Last name first. Yes, there is a male loneliness epidemic. Men need to learn social communication skills as a life skill. This will improve their overall quality in life in perpetuity. Women would, that's for their children, that's for sure. Women would. Sorry, I'm missing that. Andrew gave a good interview on the Breakfast Club. He gave the first talk about giving people stimmy checks. Yeah, he did. He did. The problem I have with stimmy checks is stimulus checks is that it's just going to raise all the prices. You know, if the U.S. government gave everybody $2,000, everybody's mortgage is going to go up $1,000. Your food price is just going to keep going up, right? I mean, that's the issue that I have with it. So, all right. So we're getting into the main argument for tonight. I don't know why my show is doing this, right? Okay. So for tonight, we are going to take a look at the review Orion Terban's. I have not watched this video here, so we're going to take a look at it. Share screen. I'll speed this up a little bit. He talks he doesn't talk too slow, but we'll speed it up a little bit. I'll put it on 1.5 here. Okay, this is Orion Terban, and this is called Men Need Friends, The Loneliness Problem. You can go over to his channel, hit the like button over there. So here we go.
To Psych Hacks, Better Living Through Psychology. And the topic of today's short talk is men need friends.
Let me slow it down a little bit here. Put it on 1.25. He does talk kind of fast.
Need. This is non-negotiable, guys. On some level, men need other men in their lives in order to be happy and fulfilled. Robin Dunbar, the Oxford psychologist who lends his name to the Dunbar number of human organization, has gone so far as to claim that men need two guys' nights a week to maintain their mental health. The issue is that 1/4 of men, a number that is likely rising, report having no close friends at all, and that, according to Dunbar, men generally are socially very lazy. There is a loneliness epidemic that is sweeping through the world of men, and it's only getting worse. Millions and millions of men are very alone and very isolated. Now you might think,
to remind you that 60% of
let me just say this is fair use. I just want to critique what he's saying here. I think Orion's generally pretty good.
Orion, can't these lonely, isolated men get together and make friends with each other? Wouldn't that kind of solve the problem? And on some level, it really is that simple. Like, to solve the loneliness epidemic, men need to find each other and invest in their friendships. But the solution is much more complex in practice. Today, I'm going to talk about a number of social obstacles that obstruct men's ability to make and keep friends, especially later in life. Let's get to it. First, I got to call guys out. Men, you suck at maintaining your friendships. And that's a real shame, because male friendships constitute some of the best relationships I've had in my entire life. They tend to be supportive, uncomplicated, and enduring. But nothing is really going to change for men unless they start to value and prioritize these relationships in their lives. Like, life is not going to go out of its way to do that for them. Men have to make that happen. And in the absence of willingness and effort, they're going to have more of the same. And I think men will have an easier time of this if they can learn to value emotional connection as meaningful in its own right. Like, women tend to find emotional connection to be intrinsically valuable. Men, not so much. Guys generally need some sort of pretext to get together. You may have heard that women tend to socialize face to face, whereas men tend to socialize side by side. It's like men need some other activity to exist to serve as a pretext for connection. Watching a game, working on an engine, taking a jiu-jitsu class, which functionally means that the connection doesn't occur if no activity exists, or if the logistics of the shared activity prove infeasible.
I don't know what's wrong with that. I mean, do we have to, again, this is the part where we're talking about socialization, about looking at doing things a certain way, or the feminine way, because we don't just get together and just have a knitting club or a book club. And some guys, but working on cards or going to a game or cooking out. I mean, I don't know why they continue to say that that doesn't count. We're socializing in a different way. Are there certain times we should get together and have a conversation? Listen, man, I'm going through some stuff at work. I'm going through something with my kids. I'm going through something with my family, my wife, my mother's getting older. Should we have friends to have those types of conversations with? 100%, absolutely. But let's not pretend like, this is that this is so this is some crazy problem that is I'm just not buying that it's that type of problem. But here we go.
Now, this isn't necessarily a problem, but one of the consequences of this requirement is that it tends to make male socializing less frequent, even in the case of perfectly willing participants, for the simple reason that the logistics aren't always going to line up. However, this can be mitigated if men can increasingly awaken to the joys and pleasures of connection, which, if they're being honest, is often what they're looking for in an indirect and roundabout way when they participate in shared activities. This is because connection isn't really a woman thing. It's an emotional need common to all human beings. Individuals vary with respect to the extent of this need, but as social creatures, it's something that all of us, men and women, need to one degree or another. Being honest with yourself about this need will help you get it met. In fact, and this is going to sound kind of crazy, but it's this apparent needlessness that creates a liability for men. Men often think that they don't need very much from other men. In general, the more you need other people, and the more other people are going to be in your life. On the other hand, the less you need other people, and the fewer people are going to be in your life. And let's be real, the virtue of self-sufficiency, both materially and emotionally, is definitely valenced in our culture in a gender direction. The rugged individualist ain't feminine. The rugged individualist is manly. And being stoically self-sufficient is always going to be more masculine than, say, being emotional and needy.
Emotional and needy. But again, I got to break this up to talk about it. Those are the type of women who are looking for masculine men are looking for those type of men, and those type of men appeal to those type of women. Now, should we carve out a place for us to be mature and sensitive and vulnerable with certain individuals at certain times? Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's not pretend that it isn't. But men do have emotions, and men do need things, at least in order to thrive, if not technically to survive. And there's a big difference between just spilling your purse out on the table and not admitting, even to yourself, that there might be things that you need and want from others. Like, there is a big distance between those two extremes.
Yeah, so you shouldn't spill the beans to everyone, but you have a small circle of friends who you have a conversation with. Don't be an open book. There's nothing wrong with being stoic at the right times, right place, and there's also nothing wrong with being able to communicate your feelings and what you're going through to the right person who it's a safe place with. Remember, one of the biggest reasons that men refuse to be open books is because they don't want it used against them, and particularly in relationships with women. They don't want it used against them.
So let's not fall into the trap of dichotomous thinking. Rejecting the one extreme does not mean that you accept the other, and vice versa. Somewhere along that continuum, and it might actually be closer to the stoic side of things than to the expressive, is the optimal position. And I'd encourage men to keep experimenting along this spectrum until they find it. In any case, it's important to remember that if men need nothing from nobody, then they might just end up with nobody in their lives. If you're interested in taking your understanding to the next level, I would encourage you to check out The Captain's Quarters. My members examine the value proposition.
Here are 4 reasons why you...
All right, so I just want to fast forward that. He does have a book. He's got some other stuff going on, so make sure you check all that.
I'd like to think that my friends don't dislike me, but I'm clearly not very important to them. Think about it. When they hang out with me, they don't get laid. They don't get paid. They don't help out their wives or their kids. They don't improve their fitness or learn a skill or solve a problem. Maybe they get to blow off some steam and have some fun, but more of a quality of life benefit than an essential component of their lifestyles. I'm like the 10th most important thing in their lives. And given the demands of the other 9, it's no real surprise that I only see my friends once in a blue moon. I'd like to see them more, but that's not ultimately up to me. You can't get blood from a stone. And let's be real. Men are rewarded when they prioritize other things ahead of their friendships. Socially, men are conditioned to be workhorses, to be producers of value. When they fall into that role, they are rewarded. When they resist that role, they are punished.
Look at that. I'm going to rewind that a little bit. This is the way women socialize. If you don't fill that role, remember the guy who was sitting on the bench, you don't fulfill that role, you get punished. That was his punishment, right? So you want to change the way that men are, and I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying this is the dichotomy. This is the problem that Scott Galloway and Richard Reeves refused to acknowledge or come up with some type of prescription in order to do something about this. Right? We've been socialized to do certain roles, and if we can't fulfill those roles, then there's consequences to that.
Can't get blood from a stone. And let's be real, men are rewarded when they prioritize other things ahead of their friendships. Socially, men are conditioned to be workhorses, to be producers of value. When they fall into that role, they are rewarded. When they resist that role, they are punished. And hanging out with his friends doesn't really benefit anyone besides the man in question. It doesn't benefit his wife or his kids or his employer or his clients or his community or his government. It only makes the individual man slightly happier.
That's why a lot of guys work all the time. It's why they put in overtime. They're on the weekends. They're trying to fix around their cars. Always trying to be productive. Always trying to be productive because this is the way we've been socialized, right? You can't ever sit down. Can't ever take a nap, and that's not healthy. That's not a healthy way to live, right? And there's a lot of heart disease that goes along with not having friends, number one, and a lot of heart disease that goes along with working too hard. One of the articles that I was reading through, I think it was the one by Miss Emba, Christina Emba. She was talking about in the African American community, it's called John Henryism, where you think you got to work so hard all the time, always working, always doing those types of things, and that becomes problematic. So you got to watch that type of thing.
Which is why it's not considered to be very important. You're going out with the boys again? Didn't you just do that a few weeks ago? I would have thought that you had grown out of this phase by now. It's time to mature and leave those days behind you. The source of this pressure, directly or indirectly, I found, is generally the man's wife or girlfriend. And the upshot is to influence the man's behavior to be more productive in ways from which she might more directly benefit.
Or just spend time with me. Either be productive, do something around the house, fix this, fix that, go to work, get some overtime, play with the kids, or let's just go to the movies, let's just hang out with me. No time for friends.
And while this productivity can lead to wealth and achievement, it does come at a cost. In fact, some men have this like Stockholm syndrome relationship with productivity. They can't escape the social expectations of being productive or the social consequences of being unproductive, so they embrace it so thoroughly that it becomes a part of their identity. I know.
Yeah. During my time in the police department, people who that was all they were. I was at the gym one time, and there was this other cop from another town, and all of us were kind of talking, and the guy says, "Yeah, hey man, let me get your number." And the cop from another town, we're in the gym working out. He's like, "Yeah, it's 911." Dude, you have to turn that cop thinking off, man. We're in the gym working out. We're not cops. I mean, we're cops right now, but we're not on the clock, man. I got to answer 911. So, so you got to be able to turn that type of thing off, right? And again, these guys, when I did the video about the alphas and sigmas and all that, it's hard for them to turn that off all the time, to their detriment. You have to be able to turn that off. So if you want to solve this male loneliness problem, and Orion is correct here, that you're walking this fine line about being too productive, never having any friends, or if you're always with your friends and you're unproductive, there's a penalty to be paid. You got to be able to find that delicate balance of being productive but not overdoing it, and then having time for work-life balance and all that.
So many guys my age who spend the first half of their day generating value for their employers and the second half of their day generating value for their wives. And that's their lives. Now, some men might find that to be the perfect setup. After all, what more does a man need besides his work and his family? However, independent of the question of whether such a life is optimally fulfilling, it is risky for men to behave in this way. A man who acts like this, who shuffles between the office and the home and back again, is a man who makes his life smaller and smaller and smaller. He consolidates his needs into fewer and fewer people, which make those relationships far more critical than they otherwise would be. And while this isn't necessarily a problem if the relationships involved are stable, trustworthy, and enduring, it is an enormous liability if they turn out not to be the case. To use an extreme example, there is a reason why it is far, far more common for men to commit suicide after a divorce than it is for women, like 10 times more likely. So many men outsource socializing and relationships to their wives over the course of their marriage. His wife's friends become his friends, and he socializes more and more with other couples.
The Lord of the Rings Woobles collab is finally here.
You guys getting a lot of commercials.
Wife is typically the one who schedules and plans and coordinates the social dimension of the relationship. And this is a problem if and when the marriage falls apart, because not only is the man out of practice securing and maintaining relationships, but the woman is much more likely than the man to keep those relationships in the wake of a divorce. Suddenly, the man finds that he is now without a social safety net, that he's neglected his own friendships, and that he potentially hasn't made a new friend since college. It's a situation like this, which is far more common for men than it is for women, that unfortunately can lead an emotionally vulnerable person to enact a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
And can't forget about the financial devastation, the attachment to the children that is now lost. So all of these different types of relationships are gone. And yes, again, it just feels like as if he has nothing else to offer.
In any case, I think it's critically important for men to understand that their lives are much more than the value they can produce, and to continue to prioritize the activities and relationships that make them happy as individuals over and above the expectations of their women. Doing so should not only make them healthier, but should prove to be an important hedge against a catastrophic downside. What do you think? Does this fit with your own experience? Let me know in the comments below. And please send this episode to someone who you think might benefit from its message, as it's word of mouth referrals like this that really help to make the channel grow. Anyone looking to join my free weekly newsletter or book a paid one-on-one consultation can do so on my website. There's also my book on relationships, The Value of Others, and my member community, The Captain's Quarters. The links to everything are in the description below. If you like the content here, check it out. There's a lot of value and resource I put out there that I don't discuss on the channel. As always, I appreciate your support.
All right, so that's Orion Terban. He's done some good work there. So that's his take on relationships, and the male crisis and all that. So I've given you guys some things to think about concerning the male relationship crisis, if it really is one or not. You guys can do your homework and read about that if you like. But one thing I would like to stress is that what I'm stressing from a more masculine presence. Again, I don't have a problem with anyone who wants to live a different type of lifestyle, or is more artsy, or is even more close to the feminine spectrum. I don't have a problem with any of that. Do you, and be the best version of yourself. However, for masculine men out there who I do advocate for, I would see, this idea that women are saying that, we want this, we want that, and, be this kind of way at the workforce and this, that, and the other. Even the woman who wrote the article said, yeah, you know what, I can concur that this is not the type of man that I really want in my life, right? As a straight, cis, heterosexual woman, this is not the type of woman, not the type of man that she wanted. So we got to try to take what we're being fed here with a grain of salt, and really kind of, look at it with the side eye about what we're trying to accomplish here. So if you're a man out there and you are struggling to get friends, try to figure out some places where you can get those friends that you would want, right? Go to a bar when it's football season, or don't be afraid to talk to someone if there's a cookout, if you're tailgating someplace, or friends at your job, or friends at church, or wherever you would go. Maybe some old friends, or try to have a meetup group with a Facebook group. And there's all kind of different ways to do it. If you're into traveling, try to, wherever you want to go, join a traveling group on Facebook and see if you can actually meet up, things along those lines, right? Become involved in your kids activities, maybe start coaching, to talk to some other coaches. There's all different types of ways to do it, but you have to, kind of deal with your loneliness epidemic, or loneliness problem, if you are indeed lonely, right? And there is a distinction between being alone and being lonely. If you like the way that you're living, if you don't mind your personal space, you don't like to be around people and all that. And there is a video that I wanted to discuss one time. Let me see if I can find it. Actually, let me see if I can find it. There's this one guy who said that he doesn't mind being alone. Let me see if I can find this video. He doesn't want to talk to anybody anymore. So let me see if I can find this video here. I got crazy stuff on my filters here. No, I can't find it. Let me see. Let me switch accounts here. Maybe it's on my other. Yeah, the brother who wants a peaceful life. Some people are like that. Listen, I don't really mind that. I'm that type of brother. Listen, I don't mind a peaceful. I have a lot of good friends I can call up and talk to and all that kind of stuff. But we don't have to talk every day. And some people do. So you got to figure out who you are, what you like, and what's going to work for you. And don't be if you want more friends, you got to. They're not just going to come. If you want them, you got to go get them. You got to make them. Let me switch accounts here. Yeah, you gotta. So they're going to they're around. You just got to go look for them. And don't be afraid to make them. Now, here it is. All right, so this is this video here. Present, share screen.
Tell you something. I don't want to go out anymore. I don't want to do shit. I am 51 years old. I am in bed by 9 o'clock. All right. The last thing that I'm looking to do is meet new friends because new friends may ask me if I want to go out, and I don't want to go out. I don't want to do anything, nothing. I want to just do whatever I want to do. I don't want any recommendations from the outside world. I don't want to be asked to go out and get drinks or do anything. And if I do go out, you're not getting me past 10, 15. Without a doubt, the Uber is on its way. I mean, I can't do it. I can't do it. You know what it is too? I live by myself and I swear to God, the best thing. It really is living by yourself. You get to say and do whatever you want. You want to talk to yourself, you talk to yourself. You don't want to talk to yourself, don't talk to yourself. You want to watch TV, you watch TV. You want to go to BurgerFi down the block, go to BurgerFi down the block, get a cheeseburger, bring it back. Who knows? Watch a little Netflix, sit down on a balcony, do a show, whatever. Read a book. I don't know, maybe reading the Bible. I may be reading a self-help book. Next thing you know, I'm full blown on The Shining on Stephen King. I don't know. But there is nothing like it. Nothing. I mean, I have to tell you something. I don't want to.
So that's that, brother. You can take that for what it's worth. So that's that. There was another guy on YouTube. He was walking through the woods. I had that video saved. I don't know what I did with it, but anyway. So that's his philosophy. I think that he's a older guy, 51 years old. But if you're in your 20s, I wouldn't adopt this type of philosophy. 20s, 30s, right? You should still be living life. And again, if this is a problem for you, if you're still looking to have friends, be friendly, you know, I wouldn't adopt that philosophy. To Rhonda's question, are men afraid to be vulnerable with other men? I wouldn't think so. I think that it's going to be just as problematic as if you if you're going to be betrayed. So if you are not going to be betrayed, if you feel as if you are going to if you talk to someone and you're going to hear those secrets again, part of this is going to be a vetting process. You got to know who's a real and who you can confide in, and that's going to take time, effort, and practice. But that's the way that it goes. So I am not afraid with that. I'm not going to talk to everyone, but I'm going to talk to my close friends, people who I've vetted, who I know, are going to take my secrets to the grave. So I don't think in general. I just don't. I think a big part of it is just looking at it from this new perspective that there's something wrong with being stoic. There's something wrong with, you know, traditional masculine qualities. And again, I'm stressing what the woman said, Miss Emba said in her piece. I don't want those type of men either. Right? So it's okay to talk all this kind of stuff and say all this and be about all that. And we want this kind of type of man and be more vulnerable and don't be afraid to cry and all. But even she said, I don't want that either. I that just tickled me. So, and even the two leading experts in this field, and I'm saying leading because they get the most clicks and views and are invited to CNN and all these different talk shows and all this kind of stuff. Scott Galloway and Richard Reeves, they don't have the answers either. The first thing out of their mouths is, well, we don't want to step on women's toes. That's the first thing out of their mouth. It's the first thing out of their mouth. And anytime you try to have a conversation about dealing with men, nobody wants to hear it. They don't want to hear about male self-deletion rates. They don't want to hear about the plight of black boys in schools. They don't want to hear about divorce statistics and how many men are offering themselves at this. They don't want to hear that. It's man up. It's man up. Take control of your life. Deal with the situation. Be strong, be independent. Where are the men at? It was the last video I did with Auntie Anita. Where are the men at? You can't have these men and then try to socialize them in a different way. And even Orion Terban, in the video we just watched, said it's a fine line. You're doing too much or you're doing too little. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Crazy. Everyone should have a close circle where they can feel confident that whatever said remains there. Absolutely. I think that the music is a major influence. I think the music is a major influence on men. A lot of new rap is about it's about being savage and not trusting anyone. I don't listen to the new stuff, but I can tell you from the 90s hip hop, it's all the same thing. So I don't know what's going on today, but I'll take your word for it. I don't really listen to the new stuff, but it's certainly having. I think the music has an effect. To what degree, I don't know. And to that point, if music is affecting them, is female rap, which is just as misogynistic in my estimations as the traditional male rap, is that affecting women? So I don't know. Vulnerability is one of the highest form of intimacy. You got to have trust, though. You got to be able to tell somebody what's going on. You got to be able to tell somebody what's going on and never, ever hear it again. It is, I agree with you that there's a certain level of intimacy and trust. But if that person can't keep their mouth shut, what do you have after that? What can you have after that? Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. Gangster rap does glorify toxic masculinity. Yeah. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm not disagreeing with that. So I appreciate you guys. Yes, current female rap is having a negative influence on young women. It's having a terrible influence on it. It is the worst. It is the worst. Somebody said it is the worst. It is the worst. I mean, they're taking the lyrics that men were saying about them and putting it on steroids. I do this, I do that, I do this to take this down, I have this dude. Okay. 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 What a time we are having. So I'm hoping to have a young lady on tomorrow night. We're going to talk about whether feminism was a net positive for women. She has not emailed me back. She said she put in the calendar, but I haven't heard from her. But I'm hoping to have her on so we can talk about this. Let's see. You guys can buy me lunch here. So that's my presentation for tonight. Is there a male loneliness epidemic? I think that we got to look at what we're talking about, what male loneliness is, what it looks like, and what the negative factors are to it are. Some of the negative factors are psychological problems and trauma. It can be, men who are who have these close relationships, who have this intimacy, as people wouldn't want to call it. If you can develop that, then you lessen your likelihood for self-deletions and you increase your lifespan because you are more likely to have someone who's going to encourage you to go get help. to go to the doctor, to eat right, to exercise, all that type of thing. So you should develop some type of close knit circle because it has life-saving, life-changing benefits to what is going on in your life and what's going on in your life. So if you're dealing with a hard time, layoffs and you know cutbacks, problems with your children, problem with your family, problem with your mom, problem with your dad, going through a cancer scare, going through a medical scare, having someone to talk to about that is important. At the same time, you got to cultivate and nurture those types of relationships. And as Ryan pointed out, that if you are alone all the time, then you're not going to have anybody to confide in, and the less people that are going to confide in you and be there for you. And don't forget, friendship is a two-way street. You can't always be pouring into somebody else wanting them to listen to your stuff, and you don't ever want to listen to their stuff. You got to listen. You got to be a two-way street. You got to be not only you have to be looking for a good friend, you have to be a good friend. You can always be looking for a good friend. You have to be a good friend. Just like if you're looking to be a good spouse, looking for a good spouse, you have to be a good spouse. And that takes sacrifice. That takes selflessness. And a lot of people, this society that we're living in, they are more selfish. They are more self-centered. They're about them, their bag, and what they can get than anything else. And that's a terrible way to be. That's a terrible way to be. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you. All right, y'all. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank you so much. Make sure you hit the like button. Please hit the like button. I will see you guys. And hopefully we will have a show tomorrow night. And we would have someone on who wrote a couple of articles about how feminism failed women. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation. Professionals are the best option. Few people can give healthy advice nowadays. I'm not in love with the professionals and therapists and stuff. I'm not in love with that. I'm not in love with that. I didn't read through that full article there about the APA psychological advice about how to deal with men and their loneliness issues. But if you read through that, the problem I have with psychology overall is that it doesn't seek to change your circumstances. It seeks to get you to be adjusted in your circumstance. That's the biggest issue I have with psychology. Psychology says, here's the way your life is. Here's the environment that you're existing in, right? Psychology, as a rough definition, is the way that your brain behaves and causes the manifestation of behavior. But included in that is the environment. They did all these experiments with pigeons and mice and all this kind of stuff, how fast they can find the cheese, and how many times a bird or a pigeon would peck at a button in order to get food, and all these different experiments to figure out how you were influenced by the environment. And psychology is trying to say, we want to get you used to this environment. That's the issue I have with it. That's why I don't like. I mean, a professional is good sometimes, but sometimes you got to change your environment. And this is the problem that I have with all this type of stuff that we're talking about here, right? You're telling all these men about how they should live, how they should be, be more sensitive, do this, do that. But the environment that we live in isn't conducive to that, because a man who's not productive is not going to get a woman. A man who's not productive is not going to get a job. A man who doesn't, if you can't, you have to take a look at the environment and adjust to that and try to overcome that as much as possible, not just be settled down into it. And I think that that's a problem with a lot of guys now, is that they're settling down into these environments and saying, okay, I can't succeed in the world. College is too expensive. I don't want to get a trade. It's just easy. Life outside is tough. Let me just settle down and just play my video games all day. And instead of interacting with a real woman, I'll just crack open my laptop or open up my phone, get my bottle of lotion, and handle myself, rather than getting out there and doing the hard work. So hopefully a professional can get them to see that and go in the right direction. The right therapist, and in my opinion, men should seek professional advice from other men only. No, I definitely agree with that. I don't think that women can. I think they're trying to. I think they're trying to, but they just can't. They just because they want. I don't know if they know that they're doing it, but they want men to be more like women, and you can't because the women. Because again, women are saying we don't want these type of men, right? We don't want those type of men. So this redefining masculinity. Yeah, I definitely agree. But we need more male therapists. We need more male therapists. So, how are we going to get more male therapists if we're not preparing men in schools and we're suspending them left and right and shooting up with Ritalin and feminized school systems and all this kind of stuff? Are we going to get more men that want to go into therapy? And I think that they should, because we could counteract a lot of these issues and problems, right? So, all right, y'all. Thank you so much for checking out the live. I really appreciate it. Hit the like button. I did record a driving video that'll be dropping later on this week. It's going to be kind of similar to this video, but we'll make it happen. And hit the like button. Much love and peace, y'all. Take care.